잠시 후 1시부터 제8회 세계인문학포럼 개회식을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 장내에 계신 귀빈분들께서는 입장해 주시기 바랍니다. 잠시 후 1시부터 제8회 세계인문학포럼 개회식을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 장내에 계신 귀빈분들께서는 입장해 주시기 바랍니다. 잠시 후 제8회 세계인문학포럼 개회식을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 장내에 계신 귀빈분들께서는 입장해 주시기 바랍니다. 잠시 안내 말씀드립니다. 포럼의 모든 행사는 AI를 활용하여 한국어와 영어로 동시 통역이 제공됩니다. 다른 언어나 개인 이어폰을 통해 음성으로 듣기를 원하시는 분은 핸드폰으로 화면에 보이는 QR코드를 인식하신 후 사용하실 수 있습니다. 또한 원활한 행사 진행을 위해 가지고 계신 핸드폰은 진동 모드 또는 무음 모드로 설정해 주시기 바랍니다. 네, 앞쪽에 자리가 많이 비어 있습니다. 뒤쪽에 계신 분들께서는 앞쪽으로 이동해 주시면 감사드리겠습니다. 네, 앞쪽에 자리가 많이 비어 있는데요. 뒤쪽에 계신 분들께서는 앞쪽으로 이동해 주시면 감사드리겠습니다. 먼저 인사드리겠습니다. 오늘 개회식 사회를 맡은 숭실대학교 교수 임수연입니다. 제8회 세계인문학포럼에 함께해 주신 여러분 진심으로 환영합니다. 깊어진 가을의 끝무렵 한국 유교 철학의 본원 이곳 안동에서 세계 각국의 인문학자와 귀빈 여러분들을 모시게 되어 매우 영광입니다. 먼저 첫 번째 순서로 국민의례를 하겠습니다. 모두 자리에서 일어나 정면에 국기를 향해 주시기 바랍니다. 국기에 대하여 경례.
나는 자랑스러운 태극기 앞에 자유롭고 정의로운 대한민국의 무궁한 영광을 위하여 충성을 다할 것을 굳게 다짐합니다.
바로 모두 자리에 앉아주시기 바랍니다. 애국가는 생략하도록 하겠습니다. 다음은 오늘 귀한 걸음 해주신 내빈분들을 소개하겠습니다. 한 분 한 분 따뜻한 박수로 환영해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 우선 홍원아 한국연구재단 이사장님 참석해 주셨습니다. 계속해서 권기창 경상북도 안동시장님 함께해 주셨습니다. 그리고 김선욱 제8회 세계인문학포럼 추진위원장님 함께하고 계십니다. 그리고 피니스 찬탈랑시 유네스코 방콕사무소 사회인문과학 부장님 참석해 주셨습니다. 그 외에도 많은 분들이 자리해 주셨는데요. 시간 관계상 모두 소개드리지 못하는 점 너른 양해 부탁드립니다. 이제 본격적인 행사의 시작을 알리는 뜻깊은 시간을 갖겠습니다. 제8회 세계인문학포럼의 성공적인 개최를 위해 최선의 준비를 다해 오신 김선욱 추진위원장님을 무대 위로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Distinguished President of the National Research Foundation of Korea, but I sincerely hope you will be inspired to return, even without a specific invitation, to continue this vital conversation. Until then, please foster the connections you make here and create new opportunities for mutual exchange. To all our participants, once again, a most profound welcome. Thank you very much.
네, 이번 행사의 성공적인 개최를 위해 많은 분들이 함께해 주셨습니다. 김선욱 위원장님, 감사합니다. 다음은 제8회 세계인문학포럼의 시작을 알리는 개회사가 있겠습니다. 최교진 교육부 장관님은 교육 현장과 정책을 두루 경험하신 교육 전문가로서 우리나라 인문학 교육의 미래를 이끌어가고 계십니다. 인사 말씀은 영상으로 만나보겠습니다.
안녕하십니까. 교육부 장관 최교진입니다. 우리나라 정신문화의 뿌리이자 유구한 역사와 전통을 가진 고장 안동에서 제8회 세계인문학포럼을 개최하게 되어서 매우 기쁘게 생각합니다. 그리고 이번 포럼의 성공적인 개최를 위해 물심양면으로 애써주신 경상북도 이철우 도지사님과 권기창 안동시장님, 그리고 홍원화 한국연구재단 이사장님, 포럼을 기획하고 준비해 주신 김선욱 추진위원장님께 다시 한번 감사드립니다. 또한 기조 강연을 맡아주신 모하메드 알리 벤마크루프 교수님을 비롯해서 참석해 주신 국내외 연구자 여러분 모두 뵙게 되어 매우 반갑습니다. 2011년부터 개최된 공존을 위한 모색이라는 두 개의 주제로 세계 각지에서 모인 연사가 참여하여 강연, 발표, 또 토론 등을 진행합니다. 세계인문학포럼이 학술 행사를 넘어 인간성에 대한 가치를 되새기면서 인문학이 열어주는 길 위에서 미래 사회의 방향성을 모색하는 논의의 장이 되기를 기대합니다. 인공지능 대전환의 시대, 인문학을 통하여 인류가 더불어 살아가기 위한 공존과 상생의 의미를 생각해 볼 수 있는 뜻깊은 시간이 되기를 바랍니다. 고맙습니다.
네, 개회사 말씀을 전해주신 최교진 장관님 감사합니다. 다음은 환영의 말씀을 들어보는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 홍원화 한국연구재단 이사장님의 환영사가 있겠습니다. 국가의 학술 및 인문학 진흥과 연구 역량 제고에 기여하고 계시는 홍원화 이사장님께 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
예, 반갑습니다. 한국연구재단 이사장 홍원화입니다. 우리 안동이라고 이야기하면은 정말 대한민국의 정신적인 고향이라고 이야기를 해도 다들 긍정하실 거라고 믿어 심지 않습니다. 이곳 정신적인 고향 안동에서 제8회 세계인문학포럼을 위해 귀한 걸음으로 안동을 찾아주신 국내외 인문학자와 전문가 그리고 시민 여러분들께 깊은 감사의 인사를 드립니다. 특히 바쁘신 일정에도 불구하고 참석해 주신 교육부 최홍준 과장님, 그리고 금기창 안동시장님께 각별한 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 영상으로 축하의 말씀을 보내주신 장관님, 그리고 이철우 경상북도지사님, 리디아스 프리토 유네스코 사무처장님께도 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 또한 이번 포럼을 성공적인 개최를 위해 힘써주신 교육부, 경상북도 안동시, 그리고 함께 협력해 주신 여러 기관의 관계자분들께도 진심으로 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 한국연구재단은 자연과학과 공학은 물론 인문사회의 분야까지 폭넓게 지원하는 국내 유일한 연구 지원 기관으로서 인문학이 인간과 사회 속에서 실질적 의미와 역할을 확장할 수 있도록 지속적으로 노력하고 있습니다. 2011년 처음 시작된 세계인문학포럼은 인류가 직면한 시대적 과제에 대해 세계의 석학들이 함께 모여 논의하는 글로벌 인문학 플랫폼으로 성장해 왔습니다. 이 포럼은 이제 단순한 학술 행사를 넘어 인문학의 가치와 가능성을 사회 전체와 공유하고 지식과 문화가 공존하는 인류 공동체의 미래를 함께 모색하는 뜻깊은 장으로 자리매김하고 있습니다. 올해 세계인문학 포럼은 큰 두 가지 주제를 다루고 있습니다. 첫 번째, AI 대전환 시대의 인문학, 그리고 공존을 위한 모색을 주제로 열리고 있습니다. 지금 우리는 인공지능이 인간의 사고와 감정의 영역까지 확장해가는 문명사적 전환의 한가운데 서 있습니다. AI 기술은 인류의 삶을 혁신적으로 변화시키는 동시에 인간의 존엄과 윤리, 정체성에 대한 새로운 질문도 던지고 있습니다. 이러한 변화의 흐름 속에서 인문학은 기술 발전의 속도를 따라가는 것이 아니라 인간의 본질을 지키는 인간을 위한 기술 발전이라는 방향을 제시하는 나침반의 역할을 해야 할 것입니다. 지금 모두가 보시고 계시는 것 같이 제가 한국말을 해도 실시간으로 AI가 통역을 하고 있습니다. 이런 상황 속에 인문학적인 그 방향을 오늘 참석하신 여러 연구자, 학자님들께서 잘 정립을 해주셔야 된다라는, 나침반의 역할을 해주셔야 된다는 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 오랜 세월 인문 정신의 뿌리가 살아 숨쉬어온 도시, 이곳 안동에서 세계 각국의 연구자들이 함께 사유하고 대화하며 AI 시대의 인간다움, 공존과 윤리, 인문학적 상상력의 가치를 나눔으로써 뜻깊은 공간과 시간의 향유의 기회가 되기를 간절히 소망해 봅니다. 한국연구재단은 앞으로도 AI 시대를 살아가는 인류가 더 인간적인 사회로 나아갈 수 있도록 더 적극적으로 인문학 연구를 지원해 나가겠습니다. 끝으로 포럼 준비를 위해 애쓰신 김선욱 추진위원장님과 추진위원회 위원님들 모든 분들께 감사의 인사를 드립니다. 2025년 에이펙 정상회담이 각국의 성장을 도모했다면 2025년 제8회 세계 인문학 포럼은 그 성장에 걸맞는 성숙을 모색하는 계기가 될 것으로 믿어 심지 않습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 이번 행사가 인문학 연구에 큰 발전이 되기를 기원합니다. 홍은아 이사장님 감사합니다. 이어서 권기창 안동시장님의 환영사가 있겠습니다. 이곳 안동은 대한민국 인문학의 중심지, 즉 정신문화의 수도로 불릴 만큼 인문학적 의미를 지닌 곳입니다. 이곳 안동에서의 포럼 유치를 위해 힘써주신 권기창 시장님께 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
우리는 우리는 오늘 인문학 포럼을 계기로 해서 우리가 살아온 지난 일을 되돌아보고 사람 중심의 세상인 지속 가능한 미래를 모색하기 위해서 이 자리에 함께 모였습니다. 함께 해주신 모든 분들께 존경과 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 우리 안동은 세계 속의 한국, 한국 속의 한국으로 자리매김한 한국 정신문화의 수도로서 사유와 성찰을 중심으로 하는 정신문화와 재미와 감동을 중심으로 하는 놀이문화, 그리고 이야기와 정성이 가득 담긴 음식문화가 함께 공존하는 한국 문화의 1번지입니다. 이와 같은 문화의 가장 기본은 인문학입니다. 우리 안동 출신인 태계 이황 선생님은 인문학을 실천하기 위해서 많은 노력을 하였고 그 결과 대한민국의 하늘나라의 길 위에 수많은 인문가치의 찬란한 꽃을 피웠습니다. 이제 우리는 찬란한 역사를 뒤로하고 새로운 미래로 가야만 합니다. 이와 같은 꿈을 현실로 만들기 위해서는 인문학의 중요성을 더욱더 깊이 생각을 해야만 합니다. 물질 만능주의로 인한 세계 금융위기의 반성 과정에서 세계사의 중심축이 돈과 경제를 중시하는 서양에서 사람과 인문을 중시하는 동양으로 서서히 이전하고 있습니다. 그 중심에 대한민국 안동이 있다는 것은 매우 자랑스러운 일이라고 생각합니다. 안동은 이와 같은 인문 가치를 전 세계 인류의 보편적 가치로 자리매김시키기 위해서 매년 인문가치 포럼을 개최하고 있습니다. 사람 중심의 세상을 만들어야만 우리나라는 물론 전 세계가 지속가능한 내일로 도약할 수 있다고 생각합니다. 안동에 계시는 동안 공감과 배려의 정신이 가득 담긴 인문정신을 마음껏 느끼시고 또한 안동의 문화도 마음껏 즐기시며 안동의 먹과 흥을 느끼고 가시기 바랍니다. 고맙습니다.
네, 오늘 말씀해 주신 것처럼 안동에서 좋은 추억을 만들어 가시기 바랍니다. 권기창 시장님 감사합니다. 이어서 오늘 이 자리를 축하해 주시기 위해서 이철우 경상북도 도지사님께서 축사 영상 메시지를 보내주셨습니다. 함께 만나보시죠.
반갑습니다. 이철우 도지사입니다. 한국 정신문화의 수도 안동에서 제8회 세계 인문학 포럼이 열리게 되어 매우 뜻깊게 생각합니다. 깊이 있는 담론의 장을 마련해 주신 김선욱 추진위원장님과 관계자분들께 진심으로 감사드립니다. 지금 우리는 AI 혁명이 이끄는 거대한 전환의 시대를 살고 있습니다. 기술이 인간의 한계를 넘어서는 이때 우리는 다시 묻습니다. 사람이란 무엇인가? 인간다움을 지키며 공존의 길을 찾는 일, 그 해답은 바로 인문학 속에 있습니다. 경상북도는 인문 정신을 바탕으로 기술과 사람이 다 함께 행복한 세상을 만들어가고 있습니다. 특히 지난주 경주에서 성공적으로 마무리된 에이펙 정상회의는 그 노력의 결실이자 경상북도를 세계 속에 우뚝 세운 역사적인 순간이었습니다. 이제 그 성과를 이어 포스트 에이펙 문화와 평화의 메카가 될 경주 포럼을 전략적으로 준비해 세계 중심의 글로벌 경북을 만들어 가겠습니다. 이번 세계 인문학 포럼 역시 그 여정을 함께하는 지혜의 플랫폼이 되기를 바랍니다. 세계 인문학 포럼 화이팅!
네, 축하 말씀을 해주신 이철우 도지사님 감사합니다. 계속해서 오늘 이 자리를 축하해 주시기 위해서 리디아 아서 브리토 유네스코 사무총장보님께서 축하 영상 메시지를 보내주셨습니다. 함께 만나보겠습니다.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is an honor to speak on behalf of UNESCO at this 8th World Humanities Forum. I warmly thank the Ministry of Education of the Republic of Korea, the province of Gyeongsang-buk-do, and the city of Andong for their partnership and vision. Since its creation in 2011 by UNESCO and the Republic of Korea, this forum has become a vital platform for reflecting on what it means to be human in a rapidly changing world. This year's theme, The Humanities in the Age of AI Transformation, Exploring Paths to Coexistence, is especially timely. Artificial intelligence is reshaping how we think, learn, and relate to one another. It influences how knowledge is produced, creativity expressed, and decisions made, even how we perceive ourselves as human. These shifts demand more than a technical or regulatory solutions. They call for ethical reflection, cultural understanding, and the philosophical depth, the essence of the humanities. UNESCO's social and human science sector leads these efforts. The recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, adopted in 2021 by all member states, offer a global framework to ensure AI serves humanity and protects human rights. Through the management of social transformation program, UNESCO studies how technology shapes societies and promote inclusive, evidence-based policies so that no one is left behind. This work advances UNESCO mission to foster coexistence, reminding us that technological progress must go hand in hand with human progress, grounded in diversity, solidarity, and shared humanity. I wish you a very successful forum. I thank you.
네, 축하 말씀을 해주신 리디아 아서 브리토 사무총장부님 감사합니다. 다음은 오늘 함께 해주신 분들과 기념 촬영을 진행하겠습니다. 호명되신 내빈들께서는 무대로 올라와 주시길 바랍니다. 홍원아 한국연구재단 이사장님, 권기창 안동시장님, 최홍준 교육부 학수연구정책과장님, 전우연 한국연구재단 인문사회연구본부장님, 김진희 안동시 평생복지국장님, 김선욱 제8회 세계인문학포럼 추진위원장님, 모하메드 알리 벤마크루프 모하메드 6세 폴리테크닉 대학교 교수님, 아메드 나심 바르카위 후자이라 철학의 집 학장님, 피니스 찬탈랑시 유네스코 방콕 사무소 사회인문과학 부장님, 권헌익 케임브리지 대학교 석자 교수님, 김혜숙 국제철학연맹 회장 전 이화여대 총장님, 손동현 우성정보대학교 총장 제4회 세계인문학포럼 추진위원장님, 이창규 중앙대학교 부총장님, 박진영 아메리칸 대학교 교수님, 정원섭 경남대학교 교수님, 안내에 따라 도열해 주시기 바랍니다. 네, 이어질 제8회 세계인문학포럼에 많은 관심 부탁드립니다. 네, 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 감사합니다. 촬영 마무리하겠습니다. 내빈 분께서는 앉아 계셨던 자리로 다시 착석해 주시면 감사드리겠습니다. 네, 이상으로 제8회 세계인문학포럼의 개회식을 모두 마치도록 하겠습니다. 개회식에 함께해 주신 내빈 여러분들께 다시 한번 진심으로 감사의 말씀 전합니다. 네, 이어서 기조 강연이 계속 진행되겠습니다. 자리에서 잠시 기다려 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Hello everyone, I'm Sonu Kyung again. It's truly my pleasure to host today's keynote speech. I had the opportunity to greet you during the opening ceremony. Now that the official ceremony has concluded, we can shift our full attention to the main academic content. This also allows you to move into a slightly less formal and more engaging atmosphere. I hope that's good news to you. You see what I mean? Okay, thank you. Today's keynote address is not only the very first keynote of the 8th World Humanities Forum, but it is also deeply connected with UNESCO, one of our key sponsors. That's because today's distinguished speaker, Professor Ali Benmakruf, was actually nominated based on the recommendation of a UNESCO committee member who has been instrumental in helping us organize this forum. The most important host of the World Humanities Forum is the Ministry of Education of the Republic of Korea, and the Gyeongsang-buk-do province and the Andong city serves as our co-hosts. As the central and the local governments, they have provided the crucial financial support that has made this entire forum possible. Since this is an academic event, the public organization in Korea responsible for facilitating university-level research is the National Research Foundation of Korea. The president of the NRF, Dr. Won-hwa Hong, is a former university professor whose academic background is in architecture. Recently, he also served as the president of Gyeongbuk National University. As I just mentioned, since Dr. Hong is an architect by training, we can certainly say he specializes in an area quite close to the humanities. As we know, architecture demands a fundamental understanding of humanity itself. Dr. Hong has shown great interest and devoted considerable attention to ensuring the success of this forum, and we believe this continued and even greater support will follow. 홍원아 이사장님 잠시 일어나셔서 한 박수 받아주시면 좋겠습니다. Could we please give a warm round of applause to President Dr. Won-hwa Hong? Thank you. He promised a better facilitation, for the next forum. Right? Yeah. Now, I seem to have momentarily strayed from my subject. Let's go back to UNESCO. As you heard, our keynote speaker, Professor Ali Benmakruf, was recommended by UNESCO. Both the UNESCO headquarters in Paris and the Korean National Commission for UNESCO are co-sponsoring this forum. Furthermore, the commentator for Professor Benmakruf's presentation, President Hye-soo Kim, is also currently working with the UNESCO to advance the development of the humanities. We also have Dr. Finis Chantalangsi. Where are you? Yeah. He holds an important position at UNESCO's Bangkok office and joining us. He is scheduled to deliver a speech tomorrow, right? Yes, on the topic of AI bias. And to further honor this keynote session, we received a congratulatory video message from Dr. Louise Oosterbeck, the president of the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences, CIPSH. President Hye-soo Kim was instrumental in arranging this. Since the video is wonderful, but it's a bit lengthy, so we won't screen it in the middle of this session, but we will instead play it during the break after this session concludes. I think this is where I should stop talking about our friends at UNESCO. Now, let me introduce today's keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Ali Benmakruf. He is a professor at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco, having retired from Université Paris Crétin Valdemar in France. Sorry for my terrible French pronunciation. He is also the director of the African Studies Center and an emeritus member of the Institut Universitaire de France. Sorry again. Professor Benmakruf has spearheaded the philosophical dialogues connecting Europe and Asia, and the Arab world and Asia. He has authored and continues to write several philosophical books that are fundamentally rooted in Arab philosophy while addressing key aspects of Western philosophy. Now, please join me in welcoming Professor Benmakruf for his keynote lecture titled Artificial Intelligence and the Challenges of Human Conversation. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seon-woo Kim, for your generous presentation, introduction to myself. Gamsa Hamnida, I think it's what we say here. First, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the organizers of this forum, and especially to Ms. Margaret Wook, who makes everything so easy for my stay here. Gamsa Hamnida, Ms. Margaret. To Mr. Seon-woo Kim, the moderator of this session. To Ms. Hye-soo Kim, who will be my discussant. To Mr. Finit Chantalansky, the regional advisor for human and social sciences at UNESCO Asia area. Thank you so much. So, as you see on the slide, the first slide, my title is about really how AI today is challenging our human conversation. Some elements about what I will be saying today. First, I will try to give a very, let's say, general general definition of AI about learning, creating, and gaming. Then let's have a pause on the notion of data. What do we mean by this notion so frequently used? Next step will be the healthcare field, because I'm so involved in medical ethics in the university. I'm teaching to medical students. And of course, the big distinction between what we mean about, by the notion of conversation and how the difference is really deep between conversation and the paradigm of information, which is so overwhelming in AI. Then, of course, this idea of analogy between brain and machine, let's say it's the birth of the AI in the 50s. And finally, I will raise in some ethical issues as it is really one of the main elements that will be transversal during our forum. First of all, I will just say that artificial intelligence should be better described as a powerful algorithm and let aside all the question about intelligence. A powerful algorithm that uses mathematical calculation to perform certain tasks, very single, very little tasks that humans are accustomed to doing. This involves a lot of calculation, statistics, calculation, and simulation as well. It also, of course, involves massive use of what we call big data. While human intelligence from early childhood uses little data and manages to compose and create important action, AI requires a lot of data. That will be really what is the main element of all my speech today, that it is not sure that we need that much big data for learning. Little data for humanity do big things. On this subject, little and small data and big data, there is at least two very opposing ways of looking at children's learning. On one side, we may say, like Marvin Minsky in the 50s, one of the proponents of strong AI, that is to say, AI present in all areas, and that it differs really very little from human intelligence. It was Minsky's idea. He was also claiming that our mind is multi-agent society, many elements composing what we call mind, that constantly divides everything it undertakes into single tasks, and as adults, we often forget this decomposition and think that our intelligence is indivisible and spontaneous. And to him, it's really a fallacy to think that our intelligence is spontaneous. According to him, to Minsky, there is a relative amnesia about early childhood that makes us forget how we learn to build small groups, as do all the children. This lack of memory, I quote, makes us believe that all our wonderful abilities have always existed in our minds, and we never stop to wonder how they came about and developed. That's the idea that we have completely forgotten how we, step by step, compose our mind. Following this example now of children learning, the opposite side, that of Noam Chomsky, a very famous linguist, he said that really children learn with little data and constantly create sentences in a form that cannot be reduced to what AI does. Humans with little data use negation, imagination, modalities, what could be, what could have happened, what could be wished, and so on, in a way that AI cannot simulate. They also, according to him, children use what does not happen, what could have happened, and integrate this negative apprehension, a word from Alfred North Whitehead, into their word, thinking that they excluded, what is excluded is part of their choice. That is to say, when you are just thinking of something that you are not doing, it's a negative apprehension. But what you have not chosen is part of what you have chosen. And all this excluded word is part of your word. And this is very important, not just the flow of informations, but also the negation of what is part of your word. Luke Julia, one of the inventors of the Siri voice assistant, emphasizes this kind of modality, saying that our intelligence is multimodal. It uses not only what we see, the paradigms of vision is so important in AI, and we have to relativize it. It uses not only what we see, but also on our other senses, context, and many other things that are much more difficult to model than an image. We are really big facilities now to give model to images, but we are not, as humankind, dealing only with images. Not to mention, of course, the ludic aspect made up of absurdity and logic, as Lewis Carroll knew how to do in his writing, particularly in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I will be back to Lewis Carroll in a moment. Every page of this book, Alice in Wonderland, fills up with wonder and amazement at the author's boundless creativity. And we celebrate conversation as a challenge of the mind, saying always, as an advice of the caterpillar in this book, never lose your temper, keep your temper. And you know, Alice is really living in a very hostile world, and she has to face this strange world, and it is really a beautiful metaphor for a world that is not tailored to our desires, in which we are called to live. There are therefore creative faculties, such as this parable of our words seen through the eyes of a child, seemingly lost in her dreams and engaged in constant conversation with all kinds of living beings, if you remember this tale. Faculties that are not projected onto AI to be reinforced in their achievements. Alice lives in a world that puts her to the test. I have mentioned here the power of literature and of human and social sciences. Let me share with you this beautiful word from Iris Murdoch, who wrote this. She's completely contesting the idea that there is two cultures, human social culture on one side and science and techniques on the other side. There is only one culture, of which science, so interesting and so dangerous, is now an important part, certainly. But the most essential and fundamental aspect of culture is the study of literature, since this is an education in how to picture and understand human situation. Let me here say something very important. We are always trying to construct pictures and to try to resemble these kind of pictures. It's really a moral moral issue about creating pictures and trying to resemble these pictures. So we are men and mortal agents before we are scientists, and the place of science in human life must be discussed in words. This is why it is and always be more important to know about Shakespeare than to know about any scientist. And if there is a Shakespeare of science, his name is Aristotle. That's a beautiful idea. We have only one culture with the most important one part is human sciences, social sciences, literature that are shaping our and deeply shaping our complexity as humankind. Second, I told you in my introduction that I will be focusing on the notion of data. The notion of data is, let's say, completely made of so many biases and prejudices, and I will be focusing on the cognitive deficit that can lead to greater exposure to vulnerability through AI. In August 2025, just 2 months ago, OpenAI acknowledged that its ChatGPT robot first was unable to converse effectively with psychologically vulnerable individuals, and also seems to want to remedy the smooth and servile nature of chatbots, which are extremely docile and say what people want to hear without offering them any criticism, just projecting our desires. We should also mention the addiction induced by chatbots, which makes users not really attentive to, but captive the conversation, isolating them from their surroundings and reinforcing their prejudices by continuously generating data. Let's pause for a moment on the word data. This word is generally used to indicate that something is imposed on us, just stubborn facts, data imposed on you, such as sensory data. You are now seeing me, I'm seeing you. We are really here in the realm of data. Presence sensory, what we see, what we smell, what we hear, that's really sensory data, of course. So it is very limited. Let's say we are out of this room, no more sensory data. So the word of data, in the main of what it is really given, is very limited. But it is generally conveyed through descriptions that tell us about a word that is not accessible to our senses. When you will be out of this hall, you will be describing what you heard, what you feel. You will not be facing any data. You will be facing reasoning and inferences. That's why the British philosopher Bertrand Russell distinguishes between knowledge by acquaintance, which is really what is present to your senses, and knowledge by description. And even on this level of sensory data, there is, of course, a background of cultural elements, and nothing is really neutral, and nothing is really physiological basis for knowledge. But in AI, data is far from being sensory, pure or neutral. In reality, it consists of inferences, that is to say, knowledge that has already been developed with biases, most often linked to interests, particularly those of the big firms that put it into service and circulation. Not only is it not data, but it is also reasoning that is biased and presented as universal and not always explicit. The massification of data also reduces attention to data content. As a result, prejudices and stereotypes are sometimes conveyed without the knowledge of data users. I quote one of the French scholars, Jean-Pierre Dubois: despite their apparent neutrality, these data, particularly data containing physiological or psychological parameters that reveal people's identities, tastes, or health status, these data can be misused for the purpose of abuse surveillance of behavior. For example, by analyzing the food preferences of travelers or supermarket customers, it is possible to obtain information about consumers' personal beliefs or other elements that could be used for market research without their knowledge, the knowledge of the users, consent of the users, or in their best interests, and therefore under ethically unjustifiable conditions. So, after this pause on the notion of data, let's explore an example about the healthcare. There are growing calls for AI algorithms to be documented in a way that allows users to understand the steps involved in their development. What are really the steps in an algorithm? Not only the result. However, companies have become accustomed to offering algorithms without revealing how they were built. Designers of these algorithms remain silent about how their algorithms work, creating tension between the need for transparency, particularly regarding the steps involved in building algorithms, and competitive issues between manufacturers. I don't want to tell really what is at stake. In the field of healthcare, how can AI be integrated into the culture of patient autonomy, which has become irreversible? Now we cannot say that the patient has to ignore completely what it is about his, her health. Everyone wants to know what it is about health. And science has become more and more involved in patients rather than just applied to patients. This culture of autonomy grants patients the right to information about their health from healthcare professionals. But it is, as I put it, still a question. Should we talk about delegating responsibility to the machine's designer, or about diluting that responsibility? Still about these algorithms applied to sciences. The World Health Organization is considering the ability of digital service providers to restrict the independence of its system through human actions. Human actions has still to supervise all what it is about these algorithms. And if AI is a set of single tasks, as I said, ethics refer to the non-specific task that is of human supervision and evaluation, which should allow for compensation in the event of decision made on the basis of algorithms that are harmful. In particular, this involves assessing the share of responsibility that falls to the soft power designer and that which falls to the user. Many issues about this sharing responsibility today. Let me quote, we have already saw something from UNESCO 2021, but at the same moment, the Article 17 of the French bioethics law states this: healthcare professionals who decide to use a medical device involving algorithmic data processing based on machine learning from big data for prevention, diagnosis, or treatment purposes shall ensure that the person concerned had been informed and were applied, warned of the resulting interpretation. I will add something, not only warned of the resulting interpretation, but really be aware of what is understood by the patient. It's not just a question of giving information, it's a question of how the patient is really comprehending, understanding what it is at stake. And the term comprehension, understanding, has to be really added every time here. There are concerns about security and accumulation of personal data on individuals' choices, tastes, and behavior, as I said, which give rise to what the WHO refers to as behavioral data surplus. Too many data that are not completely needed, that are not completely aimed to therapeutic purposes, and that serves other purposes. Behavioral data surplus. These concerns are particularly acute in the health and social protection sector, which requires a higher level of data protection due to the higher sensitive nature of the data involved. Now, I move to really comparing conversation and information. Recently, so-called conversational robots, known also as conversational agents, have been, as you know, much developed. Is it really conversation? Having a conversation with someone means talking with your body, allowing for silence, sitting or standing. You are not saying the same words if you sit, if you stand up. Using a tone that changes according to the other person's reaction, and also engaging in a degree of playfulness in any conversation, to such an extent that it is often playfulness that has been used to describe conversation, as evidenced by the writings of Montaigne, French 16th century philosophers, or Wittgenstein, 20th century philosopher, on this subject. They were just saying that to speak about conversation is to use a metaphor of tennis play. Because to speak to someone is just to compare to send a ball. And you wait for a ball that is sent to you. Depending on the force of the ball, depending on the direction of the ball, you return the ball in a different way each time. This metaphor also emphasizes the direction of speech. Conversation is about orientation, not just content as it is in information. Direction implies a specific conversation from a person, one person to another, rather than expectation based on content. Conversing with a human being means taking the risk of being contradicted or contradicting others. I mentioned already Alice in Wonderland. Alice's tough word, she was always contradicted. Montaigne said that Socrates laughs at contradictions and even sought them out because he knew that they sharpened the mind. So much so that conversation is not conducted to learn new things, but to develop the ability to learn. It is not a matter of accumulating knowledge in the form of data. Plato took this lesson to heart, saying that education is about moving toward less. I started my talk about little data. Education is about moving toward less, not more. And consider also Lewis Carroll play on words between lesson and lesson. The lesson is to listen. Less is more. I quote the poet Robert Browning, do much less, so much less. Someone says, I know his name, no matter, so much less. Well, less is more, and you know this expression was taken up by the architect Van der Rohe in Bauhaus movement, who wanted minimalism in architecture. Less is more. Allow me to share with you on these subjects a passage from 11th century Arab philosophers, Abul Hamid al-Ghazali, died on 1111, if I may say, Common Era. His idea was to rid the heart of the rust that accumulates there. Rust here meaning bad deeds. To convey this idea, he used the following story. An Arab Muslim caliph organized a painting competition between two groups, one Chinese and one from Byzantine. So he gave two sections of a wall on which to practice their art separately by a veil. When they finished, the caliph was surprised to see that the Chinese had not used any tools. They said that they had worked and that the veil could be removed to reveal their work, if I may say. Their work consisted of polishing the wall until it resembled a mirror in which the Byzantine's work was reflected. Competition became collaboration, and through their work, doing less, the Chinese magnified the work of the others. You see what the Byzantine did in the mirror, just done by the Chinese who just polish the wall, not adding something. We are increasingly overwhelmed by a continuous flow of information that does not always have the status of validated knowledge, whereas we could take inspiration from the lessons of Plato and Chinese painter to remove everything that clutters our mind and often comes from fake news, as you know. Since 2022, on social media, the amount of fake news has exceeded that of valid information. Fifth, all about what I said comes from this analogy of brain and machine. Since the middle of the 50s, the information paradigm was really overwhelming, put forward by the founders of cybernetics. But it is one thing to talk about the brain in information terms, and quite another to reduce all knowledge to information. Our neurons are thought to be, in the cybernetic model, information processing machines. and with this idea that all is about controlling the analogies between organisms and machines. It is one of the definitions we give to cybernetics. And then we adopt this metaphor, that is to say that neural activity is thought to be a coding activity based on the binary principle of rest, action, inhibition, excitation. It is easy then, in this metaphor, to conclude that the speciality of neurons, is like a network that represents informational states governed by logical operations such as conjunction, neurons together, disjunction, separate neurons, implication from one neuron to another. The informational metaphor is used to describe the relationship between the brain and thought. Both are considered process information at different levels of representation and organization. Embedded in this paradigm of information and single tasking, the human brain has become involved in mechanical tasks as if it functions like a calculating machine. But it is really difficult to project onto the human brain, the performance of a single task or a combination of single tasks. I was a long time member and vice president of the French Committee of Health Sciences in France from 2008 to 2016, and then I conducted a report on functional magnetic resonance imaging with the neurologist Marie-Germaine Bousser. And what really functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, show is the studies of this show is that there is not necessary, and that's very important, a correlation between the amount of activity revealed in the image and the physiological importance of the task being performed. We cannot just be focusing on task and function. Similarly, the area of the brain highlighted by fMRI does not indicate that this area is devoted to a single function. You can have a high activity with not really a big function or huge function. Neuronal activity is not directly correlated with the importance of the function. That's very important. And the blood oxygenation level dependent, what we call the BOLD signal, measured by fMRI, is not a direct image of neuronal activity, nor is neural activity a direct image of the brain states, nor the brain states the image of the mind. The BOLD signal only measures the metabolic changes associated with neural activity, so it's very fragmentary and very modest. Philosophers have never spoken of knowledge in terms of addiction. On the contrary, the more we know, the more we develop the means of knowing, not only in quantity but also in quality, and conversations remain the human means not only of sharing pleasure, of talking, but also of building common projects, social projects, collective projects. However, the cognitive abilities of human beings are increasingly being called into question by the use of ChatGPT. Studies, such as the one conducted by MIT researcher Natalia Kosmina, show that just this year, memory, attention, and planning skills are in the long run atrophied by the exclusive use of ChatGPT. That's very important. Add to this the fact that the digital distraction reduces our ability to concentrate and undermine our attention span. We remember less of a text written by ChatGPT than one we have written ourselves. We absorb knowledge less effectively by this way of ChatGPT. Like bees transforming marjoram into honey, humans transform what they learn into their own language or own knowledge as well. The heterogeneous becomes homogeneous. This is what is called into question by ChatGPT, which tends to standardize knowledge without making it truly universal. Finally, my last session, it's about ethical issues raised by AI, but they were present in all my talk today, my lecture. Questioning knowledge is therefore very different from consuming data. Even when that data appears to reflect controversy in the form of some people think that, others think that. If you consult ChatGPT, you will have always this kind of balance, but it's really so artificial balance. I will show you why. Professor Raja Shatila, he is a professor of artificial intelligence, robotics, and ethics at the Sorbonne in France, emphasizes this. The artificial intelligence system is not a moral agent in the philosophical sense of the term. It is a digital system which, and it is very important, does not understand the term it uses. It's pure syntax without semantics. To think that AI will be competent in matters of morality is an ontological error. He adds, ethical deliberation is not about applying rules. It is about reflecting on concrete situations, taking into account values that may be varied and at times contradictory in order to make choices. I add something to this, going further, because it's not only a matter of making choices. No, we have to prepare our choices. Between two actions we chose, between two choices, there is an interval, and it is during this interval that the choice is made. And this interval is so important. This interval is very difficult to simulate in a chatbot or conversation agent. The interval between two actions, two choices, requires reflection that constantly weights up the available arguments, concrete situation and context. More and more, I'm deeply convinced that it is not the immediate choice that qualify really what we are doing. What qualifies what we are doing is the interval between two choices, how you are preparing your choice, how you are preparing your decision. And it is what I call attention. Attention. We have a really rich vocabulary when it comes to talking about will, free will, choice, power, control, but a very poor vocabulary when it comes to talking about attention. The automatic nature of data and its massification do not allow attention to be exercised, not to mention that most of it is forgotten as soon as it is used. To nourish this vocabulary of attention, let's start with promoting a cosmic humility. We are symbiotic in the biosphere, a microcosm within the macrocosm, and with the biodiversity of which we are part, but which we also view from the outside. Unfortunately, we often only take into account the latter. That is to say, to see the biodiversity from outside and not thinking that we are part of the biodiversity. And this is what I call cosmic humility. We therefore need a complex mindset to address these issues. Complexity is not only an element of analysis, it is also a mental construct. Ethics is not about listing principles such as respect, kindness, tolerance, benevolence. All these principles were established in response to ethical nightmares, to ethical scandals, as demonstrated by the Nuremberg Code of 1947 and various declarations of by international organizations, including UNESCO, such as the Helsinki Declaration and Mania Declaration, UNESCO 2005, and so on. Each time, it's not just to put principle, it's to put an end to reprehensive behavior. That is to say, at the beginning, there are infractions. There is something that is wrong that are presented to us. Humanity is built on norms, of course, but these norms come about through a process of normalization that puts an end to scandalous practices. So we have to face scandalous practices and not just to settle and fix principles. Of course, AI can fix principles. Furthermore, not all human situations involve problem solving. Some, as we have just seen, are not problems to be solved, but scandalous situations where facts and values are intertwined. To remedy this, the emotional, playful, and imaginative aspects of humanity prove to be fruitful. In the field of fiction, as in that of research, there is a way of dealing with unpredictability that does not depend only on available data. As Meno's paradox in Plato shows, if we know, it's the paradox of research. If we know what we are looking for, why to look for since we already know it? And if we don't know what we are researching, how will we know once we have obtained it that this is what we are looking for? As living beings, we share with other living beings a structural ignorance about how our evolution will continue. We are evolving, of course, but how? COVID-19 has shown us that it is possible for humanity as living species to face the unpredictable, which cannot be reduced to a combination of available data, and that humanity still needs models of anticipation that are not based solely on available data. Learning is not just about deduction, derivation, inferences. It is also about playfulness, imagination, as I have said many times. Lewis Carroll's famous work, Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, which is in part entirely devoted to conversation, offers language games that revive the conversation through homophonies, homonymies, creating constant surprises. You know, the beginning is beautiful. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice, she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. No pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book without pictures or conversations? More generally, idioms, proverbs, sayings, cultural sayings, which are the genius of a language and the very emblem of the untranslatable, can certainly be stored in a database, but the elements themselves are constantly changing according to the speakers, as the anthropologist Jack Goody shows in his analysis of the Bagre myth in Ghana. In this myth, people constantly modify the myth as they recite it. There is therefore an element of unpredictability. And this is my last sentence quoting the creator of Siri Assistant. Human intelligence is capable of adapting to new situations and inventing without having been specially or specifically prepared to a particular situation. Machines, on the other hand, need to have seen a similar case before. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your wonderful and insightful lecture. Now it is time for us to invite our distinguished commentator to the stage, Professor Hyesuk Kim. President Kim is currently serving as the 25th President of International Federation of Philosophical Societies, FISP. She is also a Professor Emeritus in the Department of Philosophy at Ewha Women's University, which is located in Seoul, Korea. She served there as the 16th University President. One truly remarkable point about President Kim is that the events leading up to her presidency at Ewha University marked the beginning of a significant positive political change here in Korea. In that process, she became the first president of the university to be elected through a direct vote by the entire university community. President Kim has also served as the president of the Korean Philosophical Association and had played vital roles in organizations like the International Association for Philosophy and Literature and the International Association of Women in Philosophy. She was elected as the president of FISP last year. I should mention that at that time, I was the president of the Korean Philosophical Association, which was one of the several associations that recommended her for the role. However, it was not the Korean Philosophical Association that took the initiative in her campaign. Rather, it was an international association of women in philosophy, primarily based in Europe. That spearheaded the efforts. This simply goes to show that President Kim is an internationally recognized and well-supported intellectual leader. Today, she is truly at the forefront of advancing the humanities globally. Now, without further ado, let's welcome President Hyesuk Kim to share her commentary. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you for a very kind introduction, Professor Kim. 저는 여기 오디언스 대부분이 한국 분들이기 때문에 토론을 한국어로 준비를 했습니다. 그리고 발제자를 위해서 제 토론 마지막에 잠시 영어로 질문을 좀 드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 이렇게 성대한 자리를 만들어주신 여러분들께 감사를 드립니다. 이런 자리가 마련되기 위해서 몇 달간의 거의 1년에 걸쳐서 얼마나 많은 준비가 있었을지 제가 잘 알고 있습니다. 세계 인문학 포럼은 초창기부터 처음 실시됐을 때부터 제가 봐왔고 또 때때로 관여를 했었기 때문에 제가 이런 자리에 이렇게 참여하게 된 것을 영광으로 생각합니다. Ali 벤마크루프, it's really difficult to pronounce his name, but 벤마크루프 교수님의 기조연설을 토론하게 된 것은 이제 영광으로 생각을 합니다. 저는 아까 소개받은 대로 이화여대 철학과 명예교수로 재직이 아니죠. 명예교수인 김혜숙입니다. 오늘 이렇게 FISP는 5년마다 월드 컨그레스 오브 필로소퍼스를 오거나이즈하는 그런 기구입니다. 제가 회장을 맡아서 작년부터 일을 하고 있습니다. 오늘 교수님께서 말씀해 주신 바는 이제 AI가 초래할 여러 가지 문제들을 인문학자의 관점에서 말씀해 주신 것입니다. 오늘 우리가 이렇게 주제하다시피 2022년 11월에 챗GPT가 나왔는데 얼마 되지도 않은 시기에 지금 AI로 인해서 벌어지고 있는 여러 가지 상황들이 정말 놀라울 정도로 여겨집니다. 이제 아날로그 시대로부터 디지털 시대로의 전환은 이제 불가피한 그런 전환으로 보입니다. 제가 제 기억에 남아있는 변화의 시작은 박사학위 논문 쓸 당시에 1986년 뭐 이 정도 되는 것 같습니다. 그때 처음 경험한 멍텅구리 컴퓨터였습니다. 그건 인터넷이 연결이 안 되고 그냥 편집과 이런 것만 자유롭게 할 수 있는 그 컴퓨터와 모뎀이었는데 그거에서만도 굉장한 감격을 맛보았습니다. 근데 이메일, 핸드폰, 인터넷 등장은 제 그 대학 강의 그 경력의 그 과정 안에서 굉장히 많은 그 강의 방식과 내용을 바꾸게 하였습니다. 이제 인공지능의 진화 앞에서 인간은 양가적인 감정을 느끼고 있습니다. 생명공학의 발전, 우주공학의 발전, 정보처리 기술과 미디어의 발전 앞에서 환호하는 이들, 유토피아를 꿈꾸는 이들이 있는가 하면 또 디스토피아를 갖다가 보는 그러한 사람들이 있습니다. AI의 아버지라고 하는 제프리 힌튼 같은 사람은 이제는 AI의 위험에 대해서 많은 강연을 다니고 있는 상황입니다. 제가 이제 저도 이제 또한 이러한 그 현상을 갖다 경외와 두려움의 시선으로 바라보게 되는데요. 오늘 선생님의 말씀을 간단하게 요약을 하자면 첫 번째로는 인공지능은 인간이 익히 해왔던 특정한 일들을 수행하기 위해 수학적 계산을 사용하여 만들어진 강력한 알고리즘이다. 유기체로서 세계에 대한 감각적 지식을 갖는 인간과 달리 인공지능은 빅데이터, 계산, 통계, 확률에 의존을 한다. 인공지능은 세계를 알지 못한다. 굉장히 아이러니죠. 우리는 세계에 관한 질문을 인공지능에게 하는데 사실 인공지능은 오르가니즘이 아니기 때문에 컨셔스니스를 가지지 않고 데이터를 처리하는 그런 과정 안에 있는 것이기 때문에 세계를 알지 못한다. 또한 데이터 처리에 있어서 편향성을 가질 수 있고 중립성을 이룰 수 있다. 아까 데이터에 대해서 굉장히 많은 말씀을 해주셨는데 데이터의 성격이라든가 데이터의 활용 또 미스유즈, 오남용 같은 경우가 이제 발생할 수 있겠죠. 그리고 인간의 모든 정보들이 데이터화하면서 그게 정확하게 데이터화되는 것이 아니라 특정 방식으로 데이터화될 수 있고 그런 방식으로 어떤 앱스트랙션의 레벨이 자꾸 높아지고 그러면서 인간이 정확하게 인간의 삶 자체가 그걸 어떤 방식으로 이 데이터화하느냐, 캐테고라이즈 하느냐에 따라서 굉장히 달라질 수 있는 그런 이제 근본적인 문제를 가지고 있습니다. 그래서 이런 그 기술 디자이너들, 소프트웨어 디자이너들은 데이터의 수학적, 논리적 처리에 관심을 줄 뿐 그 내용에는 관심을 갖지 않는다. 또한 인공지능을 사용한 학생들은 주의력, 비판적 능력, 자유의지가 위축될 수 있다. 다음에 두 번째로는 대화의 본질이 무엇인가라는 그 중요한 질문을 던지고 있으십니다. 대화에서는 맥락적인 파악과 이해가 매우 중요하다. 침묵조차도 매우 중요한 의미를 전달할 수가 있다. 수학화할 수 없는 것들의 영역에서 발생하는 일에 관심을 가져야 한다. 세 번째로는 뇌의 기능은 기계적 과정으로만 설명될 수 없다. 뇌의 한 부분은 다양한 기능을 수행하는 데 쓰일 수 있다. 뇌의 기능은 우리가 기계로 분석하는 것보다 더 복잡하다. 인간의 알미나 대화는 단순한 과정이 아니다. 그것은 대화하는 즐거움뿐만 아니라 그걸 통해서 우리는 공동의 프로젝트도 만들 수 있고 또 우리 자신과 세계를 변화시킬 수도 있는 것이기 때문에 이 대화가 가지고 있는 것이 이제 우리가 인공지능하고 대화할 때 상황하고는 굉장히 다르다는 것이죠. 배움에 있어서 인공지능을 사용하는 것은 인간의 중요한 정신기능, 즉 기억, 주의, 기획력, 자발적, 비판적 사고 능력을 위축시킬 수 있다. 이건 벌써 학생들 대상 연구에서 나타나고 있다고 말씀을 하십니다. 네 번째로 안다는 것은 데이터를 소비하는 것과는 다르다. AI is a digital system, not a moral agent라는 그 표현이 굉장히 압축적으로 잘 표현을 해주고 있는 것 같은데 에이전트가 되기 위해서, 에이전시가 발동하기 위해서는 어떤 결단하고 의지하고 하는 주체가 필요한데 AI는 그런 주체성을 갖지 못한다는 거죠. 그래서 주의를 기울이는 것, 잠시 말하지 않고 심사숙고하는 것, 이러한 인간적 특성들은 기계적으로 구현하는 것이 거의 불가능하다. 인간이 판단을 할 때, 윤리적 판단을 할 때 단순히 원칙을 나열하거나 연역을 하는 것이 아니라 인간이 가지고 있는 특성들을 반영해서요. 거기에는 여러 가지 욕구니 지향이니 굉장히 많은 것들이 개입될 수 있는데 AI 경우와는 이제 이것이 다르다라는 거죠. 나치의 인체 실험 재판에서 나온 뉘른베르크 코드나 비윤리적 인체 대상 실험에 관하여 세계 의학 협회에 의해서 주도된 헬싱키 선언, 또 마닐라 선언 이런 것들이 보여주는 것들을 보면 인간의 상황이 문제 해결로 항상 모아지는 것만 아니다. 이런 문제들이 발생했을 때 우리가 어떤 문제를 해결할 수 있겠습니까? 이런 역사적 사실들은 우리가 해결해야 되는 것들이 아니라 사실과 가치가 얽혀있는 참담한 상황들인데, 이런 것들을 치유하기 위해서는 인간성의 감정적이고 유희적인 상상적 측면들이 유용함이 증명되었다. 앨리스 인 더 원더랜드라고 하는 그 작품의 예를 통해서 이런 상상적 측면, 유희적 측면, 언어가 가지고 있는 혹은 대화가 가지고 있는 이런 것들을 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그래서 인간이 대면하고 있는 이 불확실성에서 알 수 없는 이런 것들 중에서 인간이 과연 무엇을 배울 수 있을 것인가. 배움은 단순한 연역의 과정이 아니다. 이것은 유희이기도 하다. 여기서는 대화와 언어 게임이 굉장히 중요하다. 그래서 관용어, 속담, 혹은 우리가 하는 농담이니 이런 것들은 번역 불가능한 것으로서 AI라고 하는 알고리즘으로 표준화될 수가 없는 그러한 것이라는 겁니다. 그래서 이 교수님은 인공지능과 달리 인간의 지능은 맥락을 이해하고 상상과 놀이를 통해서 배운다는 것, 진정한 대화는 상호작용으로서 여기에는 침묵, 경청하고 주목하는 태도, 숙고, 성찰, 그것을 위한 잠시 뜸들이기, 아까 인터벌에 대한 말씀을 하셨는데 뜸들이기 같은 것이 들어오는데, 이런 것들은 수학적, 기계적, 계산적으로 구현하기 불가능하다는 것입니다. 불가능성은 이러한 것들의 알고리즘을 만들기 어렵다는 것뿐만 아니라 이 화자에 따라서 말하는 경우마다 지금 얘기할 때 다르고 컨텍스트가 달라지면 또 다른 의미를 갖고 하는 그런 종류의 매 경우가 다르기 때문에 이걸 표준화하는 일은 거의 불가능하다는 겁니다. 인간은 이런 예측 불가능한 상황에 대해서 새로운 의미를 만들고 웃음을 만들 수 있지만 기계는 그럴 수가 없다는 겁니다. 그래서 인공지능의 한계와 인공지능이 할 수 없는 것들에 관해서는 이상이 이 선생님이 말씀하신 대체적인 요지라고 생각됩니다. 인공지능이 할 수 없는 것들은 이외에도 굉장히 많을 것입니다. 저는 토론자로서는 이러한 인문학자로서 또 이런 인공지능의 한계에 관한 것이 아니라 조금 다른 측면에서 저는 하나의 코멘트를 좀 해보고 싶습니다. 물론 나중에 질문을 하나 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다만은, 이 인문학자로서 벤마크루프 교수님의 논의에 반대할 사람 많지 않을 것입니다. 머지않아 나오게 될 것이라고 하는 범용 인공지능도 인간이 의도한 바의 일을 유능하게 처리하거나 상황에 대처하는데 탁월한 기능을 발휘할 수 있다고 해도 인간 대화에서 발생하는 미세한 의미 전달과 섬세한 소통의 색깔들을 구현할 수 있을지는 의문입니다. 이것은 우리가 아무리 많은 데이터를 모은다고 해도 학습 기반 인공지능으로는 결코 구현할 수 없을 것이라고 생각을 합니다. 그런데 또 생각을 해보면 이 세상에 존재하는 모든 문학과 모든 예술 작품을 읽고 보고 한 인공지능에게 어떤 물음을 물었을 때 마치 인간 대화자처럼 인간과 대화하고 소통할 수는 있지 않을까, 이런 생각을 해봅니다. 이런 때 인공지능이 튜링 테스트를 통과하는 것은 일도 아닐 것입니다. 튜링 테스트는 그것을 기계인지 사람에게 문항을 줬을 때 사람이 그것이 대화를 갖다 내 기계랑 하는지 사람이랑 하는지 구분할 수 없을 때 이제 우리는 그걸 갖다 이제 고도의 지능을 가진 것으로서 얘기할 수 있다는 그런 테스트인데요. 지금도 챗GPT로 매일 대화하고 역할놀이하며 또 심리 상담을 하는 경우도 있다고 합니다. 초등학생들 같은 경우 뭐 연애를 하고 있는 아이들도 많다고 하는데 앞으로 어떻게 될지 모르겠습니다. 저는 여기서 이제 이런 일이 가능한가 아닌가 하는 그런 문제보다는 우리가 대화를 어떻게 정의할 것인가, 또 인간은 대화에서 무엇을 기대하는가, 타자의 말을 이해한다는 것은 무엇인가, 인간 내면의 숙고, 딜리버레이션의 과정이나 리플렉션의 과정에 계산적, 타산적, 이 프루던스, 영어의 프루던스 개념인데요. 이런 그 타산적인 특성이 있는가 없는가, 윤리적 선택과 관련해서 AI가 내리는 판단이 인간의 그것보다 더 합리적인 가능성은 없는가, 이런 문제들이 여기 이제 개입되어 있다고 생각을 합니다. 이런 문제 하나하나가 굉장히 큰 철학적인 주제가 되리라고 생각을 합니다. 그러나 제가 관심을 갖는 문제는 AI의 본질적 혹은 존재론적 한계에 관한 것이 아니라 AI를 사용하는 인간의 측면에서의 문제입니다. 인공지능과 대화를 하는 인간은 앞으로 더 많이 늘어날 것이고 그 대화의 질도 심도 높은 방향으로 개선되리라고 봅니다. 인간 대화자, 휴먼 인터로큐터는 AI와 다양한 대화를 나누고 그것을 통해 다양한 경험을 하게 되면서 매우 감정적인 관계를 구축하게 될 수도 있을 것입니다. 우리가 마치 동물과 감정적인 관계를 구축하는 것처럼 이 관계는 AI를 마치, 진짜는 아니지만 마치 하나의 인격체처럼 생각하고 그와 마치 진짜 상호작용을 한다고 믿는 차원으로까지 발전할 수 있습니다. AI가 단순히 수학적 알고리즘에 불과하다는 것과 존재론적 차원에서 그렇다는 것과 이렇게 사용자가 감정적 관계를 형성하고 감정이입을 하며 AI와 진정한 것처럼 보이는 관계를 맺는 일은 별개의 것입니다. 우리는 오비디우스의 메타모르포시스에 나오는 피그말리온의 이야기를 알고 있습니다. 그리스 신화에 나오는 피그말리온은 키프로스의 조각가인데 나그네들을 박대한 키프로스 여인들은 아프로디테의 저주를 받아서 나그네들에게 몸을 팔게 되었습니다. 피그말리온은 여인들이 이렇게 천박하게 전락한 것을 탄식하면서 독신으로 혼자 살았습니다. 대신 그는 상아로 아름다운 여자를 조각해서 그 조각상과 언제나 함께 생활하고 그는 조각상에다가 갈라테이아라는 이름을 붙이고 마치 사람인 듯이 대했습니다. 나중에 달리라고 하는 화가가 이제 자기 애인한테 이 갈라라는 이름을 붙여주죠. 옷도 갈아입히고 몰래 입맞춤도 하면서 혼자 탄식하곤 했습니다. 아프로디테는 조각상에 진짜 여자로 변신하게 해달라는 피그말리온의 간절한 기도에 감복해서 이 조각상은 여인으로 이제 변화했다는 얘기입니다. 인공지능이 진정으로 인간처럼 느끼고 새로운 창안을 만들어내지 못하고 상상력이 없고 과거에 매몰되어 있다고 하더라도 인간은 자신의 상상력을 통해 그런 존재와 인격적 관계를 형성할 수 있고 그것과 누구보다도 진정한 대화를 나눌 수 있다고 믿을 수 있습니다. 사실상 인간과 인간의 대화에서도 우리는 상대방과 진정한 대화를 나눌 수 있는지 말하기 어렵습니다. 어떤 사람은 나의 침묵의 의미를 알지 못하며 내가 보내는 다양한 비언어적 사인을 읽지 못할 수 있습니다. 타인의 마음, other minds라고 하는 철학에서 유명한 문제가 있는데 이 철학적 논리를 우리는 알고 있습니다. AI와의 대화에서 대두되는 여러 문제들이 사람과 사람 사이의 대화에서도 대두되는 것이라면 굳이 AI가 디지털 시스템에 불과하다는 존재론적 차이가 의사소통에서의 질적 차이를 함축한다고 볼 수 없을 것입니다. 인간 간 대화에서도 상상력의 부재, 공감의 부재, 이해의 부재, 숙고의 부재, 번역 불가능함의 문제가 항상 있기 때문입니다. 앞으로 인공지능에 의해서 엄청나게 확장될 메타버스에서 인간이 어떤 삶을 살게 될지 가늠하기 어렵습니다. 기술의 발달로 인해 사이보그까지 출현할 수 있는 때 인간과 기계 사이의 경계는 매우 불분명해질 것이라고 생각합니다. 그러나 무엇보다도 제가 두렵게 생각하는 것은 인간이 스스로 만들어 놓은 거대한 관념의 세계 안에 갇혀 끝없이 수반되는 자기애에 빠져 진정으로 타자, 이 타자는 내가 마주하는 상대방뿐만 아니라 이 세계라고 하는 그 타자, 나 아닌 다른 것을 만날 수 없게 될 것이라는 점입니다. 자기가 생각한 이상적 여인을 만들어 사랑했던 피그말리온은 결국 자기 자신과의 사랑에 빠졌던 것입니다. 갈라테이아는 자기 의지를 가진 여자를 할 수 없을 것입니다. AI는 의식이 없기 때문에 세계를 알지 못합니다. AI에 빠지게 되는 인간은 결국 누군가가 만들어 놓은 정보의 바닷속을 헤매면서 피그말리온처럼 무한한 자기와의 관계 혹은 자기 지시 안에 놓이는 역설에 처하게 됩니다. 데카르트의 악마 가설이 현실이 되는 악몽이 우리에게 다가와 있는 것은 아닌가 하는 생각이 듭니다. 나 혼자 꾸는 꿈은 꿈이지만 모두가 꾸는 꿈은 현실이 된다는 관념론자의 말을 위안 삼아 잃어버린 줄도 모르는 현실을 잊고 살아야 할 것인가? 진리는 더 가까워진 것일까요? 아니면 더 멀어진 것일까요? 아니면 그런 것은 애초에 없었던 것이므로 현재 누리는 것에 집중해야 하는 것일까요? 피그말리온의 사랑의 결말은 어떤 것이었을까요? 제 토론은 여기까지 되겠습니다. I would like to make a kind of summary of my comment to Professor Benmakruf. We are witnessing the upsurge of AI. We cannot but accept the existence of AI. And you talk a lot about the limit of AI and the difference between the artificial intelligence and human intelligence. But I think it's a kind of complementary. The two kinds of intelligence are complementary, not exclusive one. We cannot choose between the two. We have to get along with AI. AI appeared in 2022. It's only 3 years since we witnessed the first appearance of AI, ChatGPT, but many things have changed. So I think, what do you think about the future relations between AI and human beings? And my comment focused on the human side, human experience of AI, human use of AI, and the problem of self-reference and continuing, or the perennial problem of self-knowledge. We are indulged into the machine we created. The data is already something we created in our experiences, and AI is living with that data. So we are always dealing with that, with human products. So we are perpetually cycling on the data we created. So that's a problem. So we cannot reach out to the other in its real sense. The other includes the other person I'm talking to, or the other things, or that consist of the world. So that would be my question and comment. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your mind-provoking comments. We originally planned to set some seats here, but we changed our schedule because we are a bit behind in time. So why don't you go back your seat, and then I'm going to invite Dr. Benmakruf to the podium, and then I'm going to ask him to give us his response to her comments. And then I'm going to collect some questions from you on the floor, and then we will conclude at 3:15. So we have altogether like 15 minutes, so please be prepared for your questions. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Haisuk, for your comments, very fruitful comments. I totally agree with you when you are mentioning this idea of complementary between human and AI. Of course, there is, as you know, what we call now cobotic, collaboration robotic. And cobotic is just this idea that there is a kind of collaboration between humankind and robots and to a certain extent algorithms. And this kind of collaboration, you are also completely right to say that there is a blurred frontier between human and AI related to what mind can do. I totally agree. I totally agree also with what you said about the evolution. That is to say, AI is a very little child. That is to say, we have not this centuries and centuries evolution of the humanity. There is not centuries of evolution of AI, so there is a kind of difficulty to say AI cannot do this or cannot do that. What I was trying to say was not that much about the limits of AI, but about the specificity of human conversation, which is to a certain extent very far from what ChatGPT can do. That was my first element, not that much limits, that the specificity of human conversation. And the other elements you emphasize on it, and I think we share this idea that to make place to silence in conversation and to make place to imagination, it's very important, and I'm still wondering what could be the place of science in AI, because I was also mentioning this important value of little data, of really small and putting less lesson things about the lesson, as Lewis Carroll was saying, as well as Plato. You also mentioned an important element about self-knowledge, and people are really living now in a world where AI starts to be a part of their self-knowledge. But the problem is that I think, philosophically speaking, that it's a lure to focus that much about self-knowledge. I think that we have really to get rid of the idea of persons if we are really, I am not saying to get rid of persons, to get rid of the idea of a person, because what it is really important, as I said, is humility, to know that we are sharing so many things with others, that we are not really individuals on our parts, but really we are, first of all, social beings. And this idea of social beings involves context, involves cultures, involves building a common world. And yes, you challenge things I said in another way, saying in this common world, we have also to make more and more place to AI. I will still be thinking about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I'm going to collect the first question here. Yes, sir. Please, can you identify yourself first and then give your question to him?
My name is Youngmin Kim. I'm Professor Emeritus of Dongguk University. Thank you so much for your provocative, at the same time very knowledgeable information, also insightful kind of the understanding of the AI in relation to the contemporary, rapidly progressive kind of the world changing phenomenon. I'd just like to mention the 5 keywords first of all, because the scope is so variety and also at the same time very deep. And I would like to mention the database, or first of all, data, and second, the attention, and then third, less is more, and fourth, the unpredictability, and then fifth is kind of questioning. This is kind of the key word for my question, but I don't want to spend too much time upon this kind of questioning. First of all, the data. I think the AI is dealing with so big, I mean, the undescribably bigger and bigger. Daily, it's becoming bigger and bigger. The small data, the big data. I think according to digital humanities people, there are two different or three different kind of the database, like the structured data or unstructured data, or in the meantime, semi-structured. So I think the AI is dealing with even the unstructured database. It's so huge. It's not structured yet, but it's still data. It's growing. Every day, social media is full of so much different kind of the growing database. So this is the nature of data. So how can you get access to the data? Previously, we didn't know. During the pandemic, a lot of people were using this kind of how to handle the big data. So now, here we are. So I think that's the nature of the database. But second of all, attention. As you mentioned very insightfully about the meaning of attention. I think I still remember Catherine Hales was talking about the attention in a different. I think there are a lot of people from the literature. I'm from the English literature, but I mean actually the literature based upon after Frank Moretti is creating some ideas, not creating but renovating a lot of idea of the less is more kind of idea, and in terms of the how do we deal with all the big database of the literature, so many data. So how can you deal with this data? And then if you use the distant reading and close reading, a lot of people, I studied with the close reading, each individual poem, and then collective the database of all one author, or maybe later we have a huge number of the other related modernism, postmodernism, and contemporary period. So this is really the nature of world literature database. And then we don't know how to handle this one. So the way we can do is kind of dealing with AI is doing this. This is my understanding. Finally,
well, can we start here because we need some time to hear from Dr. Benmakruf. Okay. So finally, I think we have only like 5 minutes for answer. So
unpredictability. I think AI is growingly understand the nature of unpredictability. If you ask a simple question, he answers a simple way. If you ask the very sophisticated question, he's answering that. So this is dangerous, at the same time, very remarkable achievement of the AI. So I just want to find out how you answer. Sorry that I spent too much time.
Well, thank you so much for your question. Actually, Professor Kim is a very famous and renowned scholar in Korea, so you need to be very careful in answering his question.
So very briefly, you're right on this distinction between structured data and unstructured data. I didn't focus my topic on this element. And now you're right, we have to make things more precise and not only speak about big data, but also about structured and unstructured data. And we are facing so many unstructured data with the problem of license that is not given to so many data that are shared. Let's say if I just put on the website that there were so many people here for this kind of, let's say, weight, or let's say how tall they are, and structured data, and I put it without your consent. You are right to focus on this element. I didn't mention it because all what I wanted to say, and it is related to your second question, it's about the learning of how children start to learn with very little data and creating so many sentences from very few data. That's why I was opposing big data to little data or small data and not being involved in what you mentioned and you are very right about it, structured and unstructured data. Really, the idea, I was struck by this work in 2023 given by Noam Chomsky, as I mentioned in my introduction, about the children who learn huge elements, but with only available little data. And this is, I think, is important. And the other part also that I wanted to focus on is that imagination. And I think there is a kind of atrophy of imagination only when ChatGPT and chatbots are used with addiction and unilaterally used. Of course, as Professor Hisuk Kim said, there is also, and maybe other way to use with clever mind ChatGPT and to make them be part of our world. But I was maybe more focusing on the biases. And I think your third question about unpredictability, it was to me the way to introduce our structured ignorance of the way we evolve in our world as living beings, and we share that with other living beings. We don't know how to evolve. We know that we evolve. We don't know how to evolve. And this leads me to promote this value of cosmic humility. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. The second question will be made by my colleague Bala. He is from Delhi University in India.
Hello. Thank you, Professor, for a very illuminating lecture. I'll straight away come to the point. The whole issue is about the conversation between AI and human, whether it is possible, or I think the more important question is to ask, how do we make it more possible? No? So that's where the whole direction of the conversation is happening. If that is the case, the ontology becomes very important here. And I believe somewhere in the discussion, it was missing, bringing in relational ontology. Because if we are talking about conversation, unless you relate yourself to the other, you cannot even begin the thought of conversation. That's where I have a small intervention with regard to the possibility of choices that you have mentioned, where you said interval becomes very important. But for me, more than interval, it's the cognition of our ontological relation with the other. That's what exactly makes the choices, the attempt to choose very possible. And in that particular context, I believe if you see the whole conversation of AI and human within the relational ontology, then even the unknown, dealing with the unknown becomes very, integral that you're talking about with regard to the child. So, these are some of my thoughts with regard to the 2 points that you have made, one related to the child and the other related to interval that you mentioned about. Thank you.
Ali, if you don't mind, can we take the third question
yes.
from Mr.
Yes.
Bakawi?
Okay.
Or Mrs. Bakawi? You do you have a question? Oh, you don't have? Okay, then let's take the last as the last. Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
you.
please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. I totally agree with you, and what you say, let me think that I had to emphasize what I said about the way chatbot robot are isolating people because they are no more communicating with others and they are just in addiction with what they project as their desire to, and they have this illusion, this lure that they are discussing with really, let's say, some being. And I totally agree with you about what you said, togetherness and relation and the others. I say that we have a very poor vocabulary about attention, and we have a big vocabulary about free will, about choice, about power, control, and that's why I promote attention and humility. And I had to say, of course, relationality, relation, togetherness, witherness. And in witherness, there is a beautiful, let's say, English joke. Witness, it's always about witness. You are witnessing something, you are with the way to deal about it. And I think this vocabulary, this rich vocabulary of relation with all its steps, relationality, togetherness, witness, has to put completely in discussion, as you say. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your insightful lecture. I'm afraid that it is now the time to conclude this session. Thank you again so much for Professor Benmakhlouf for your insightful and thought-provoking speech, and President Kim for your valuable comments, and all of you in the audience for participation. To formally close the keynote session, could you please join me in giving one more big warm round of applause to both Professor Benmakhlouf and President Hyesuk Kim. Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for your participation and attention. We'll see you back here soon. And as I promised earlier, right after this, we will be screening the congratulatory video message from Dr. Louis Osterbeck, the president of CIPSH. Please give it your attention. Thank you so much. We'll have a 30-minute break, and you can have cookies and teas outside. Yeah. Cue.
Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences in this 8th event that you organized this year once again. We are in a particular moment in history where in different geometries the world, the various cultural traditions, the various nations are rebalancing their relations, rethinking their avenues, and facing very uncertain times. Apparently, in the world that we live in, and for some decades now, the humanities have been casted aside in terms of their historical central role in the life of societies. This apparent situation actually is not only concerning the humanities. It is a process through which fundamental knowledge, fundamental science, the capacity to integrate the various dimensions of knowledge, the capacity to bridge past and future through the present. All these have been challenged, all these are in question, and all these are leading to growing disturbance, disruption, and difficulties. The model of short-term deliverables for short-term problems perceived and felt by societies is getting to an end, because it is undoubtful that for the last decades a lot of advances have been achieved in terms of improving the technical solutions for humans, expanding the life expectancy, reducing the levels of poverty, and also diminishing for a long time the tensions and the wars. However, there is a feeling that things are changing, and they're not necessarily changing for the best. And in that context, it is also a moment when societies start to think again about their possible futures. So we have been also seeing in different regions of the planet new interests, a new attention towards the humanities. South Korea has played actually a crucial role in this for over a decade, and we are particularly thankful to our colleagues in South Korea, and particularly to the organizers of this forum. But it is a wider phenomenon. It is a phenomenon that has been very clear during the pandemic, and that not only offers possibilities for our work, but also asks us to be more focused and calls us to take on the responsibility to stand to the demands, the needs, and the difficulties of our fellow citizens. Understanding that the short-term solutions are not sustainable even when they bring alleviation in different fronts, if they are not framed with a long-term series of concerns which are structured task of the humanities. It is the role of those who say it is important to think of the mid and long term in the short term. This is what people do in their individual lives, and this is what societies must do together. We are again facing the big challenge of humans, which is the challenge of keeping peace amidst differences. And it is for us to think again of our predecessors that in a number of occasions tried to think of how could peace be built, and that came to the conclusion that knowledge would be fundamental for that. Kant fought for perpetual peace, but different scholars in the past thought of this in different ways. Today we are faced with tremendous new challenges, from the energetic transition to the digital transition and artificial intelligence, which I know is a core topic of this forum this year. But what happens is that these transitions in energy, in techniques, also in terms of social organization, have also a short-term tremendous pressure on the lives of people who are not seeing the avenue of what's happening around them. So I think we need to contribute to that. And I also feel and have a personal experience that at various levels, and particularly at the level of communities, there is a renewed interest, attention to build under an interdisciplinary framework, but also encompassing other ways of thinking and of reflecting within a transdisciplinary framework to contribute to this transition we are experiencing and to hopefully build new utopias and a new, better future. The International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences is focused in bringing together all the major international organizations, but also all the main international initiatives, among which your forum is particularly relevant, so that we share and combine our energies, our strengths, our focus, our diverse opinions in order to better serve humankind. So I wish you the best of this event, and I also will hope that in the future, namely with the support of the International Federation of Philosophical Societies, Professor Aizo Kim and many other colleagues, we might join initiatives for a better, as I said, humanity's contribution towards the lives of our fellow citizens. Thank you very much.